everyone. We're going to give folks a couple more minutes just to file in. So please welcome, and we'll talk to you in a couple minutes. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I want to welcome everyone to this Legislator in Residence virtual event. My name is Emerald Archer, and I'm the Director of the Center for the Advancement of Women and Associate Professor of Political Science at Mount St. Mary's University. The Legislator in Residence Speaker Series is part of our annual center programming focused on gender equity research, conversations on timely topics. And while we continue to socially distance, my hope is that these virtual conversations will allow us to connect with one another over the course of the year. Before we get started, I'd like to thank President Anne McElhaney Johnson and her office for supporting the Legislator in Residence Speaker Series this year. Such programming would not be possible without her leadership and support. And over the next hour, our Legislator in Residence, Supervisor Holly Mitchell, will discuss gender equity issues, the future of feminism, and women's leadership in California with Assembly Member Cristina Garcia. The center is honored to host both of them this afternoon. Our conversation today is part of a launch of our new Women in Gender Studies program, and we hope that you'll learn more about this opportunity on our website. I'll share those details in the chat function so you can check out the website later at your leisure. Finally, we will reserve 15 minutes at the end of this wonderful conversation for Q&A. So as you think of conversations, please submit them in the Q&A Zoom function, and we will ask our guests to tackle as many as we can absolutely get to in the allotted time. So I want to give the floor to Supervisor Mitchell, but first let me introduce her very quickly. I cannot do her bio justice, but I'm sure going to try in about 30 seconds. Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell was elected to serve the 2nd District of Los Angeles County in November 2020. She brings an extensive public record to the Board of Supervisors. Many of the bills that she has handled have been at the forefront of expanding healthcare access, addressing systemic racism, and championing criminal justice reform. During her tenure in the California State Legislature, Supervisor Mitchell represented the 54th District for 3 years as an assembly member and later served 7 years as a state senator for the 30th District. Please welcome Supervisor Mitchell.
Hey, Emerald, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to spend a little time with the women of the Mount and to really create an opportunity to bring women leaders to the forefront to expose your amazing student body too. And I want to congratulate Emerald on the release of the Women and Girls Report, I guess maybe 2 weeks ago now. When I was in the state legislature serving with my sister friend here, we looked to that report every year as we thought about and talked about priorities for the Legislative Women's Caucus. And so thank you for your work. It is my pleasure to share time today. And we're very fortunate because before we went live, she was saying that she's supposed to be in a policy committee, so she's playing hooky to be with you. And so I appreciate that. Is my sister friend, Assemblywoman Cristina, without an H, Garcia. She's been called a force of nature, and I will second that emotion. First as a dynamic community organizer and civic activist, and now as a new generation leader in the California State Legislature. In Sacramento, she crashed the Good Old Boys Network and is leading the way to empower women to take their seat at the table. As the chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus, she has made gender equity a priority and has been pivotal in ensuring that the Women's Caucus plays an important role in budget and policy discussions. Cristina Garcia has embraced her own communities with a message of hope and inclusion. She's on a mission to educate, empower, and engage her constituents in the 58th Assembly District. For women and disadvantaged communities, she continues to fight for change with a passion to improve the lives of working Californians and to brighten the path to the future for our next generation. Please welcome my sister, friend, and colleague, Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia. Welcome to the Mount. Uh-oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Someone's knocking on my door. It's a little weird. I apologize.
It's okay. Well, you're about to hear all kinds of things here, as I said, in my dining room table. So that's the nature of what we do.
Okay. Give me 1 second. A colleague left their phone here. So, they're having a panic attack.
Okay. Welcome to live Zoom programming. when a colleague leaves their phone in their colleague's office and we can't do anything without our phones, then she has to get up and take the phone to her colleague. So while we wait, we're going to have a really dynamic conversation with her today. I'm going to ask her some questions like how she defines feminism. We're going to talk about the launch of the Mount's New Women and Gender Studies major. We're going to have a good time. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I was filling time, as they say in Hollywood. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you spending a little time with us. I think it's always important that we as women in leadership roles create proximity to our young women who are emerging leaders on this all women's campus. So thank you very, very much for participating. Should I get started with a hard question or an easy question?
Whatever you want.
Hard, because you're so smart. So, as Emerald said, that the whole point of today's conversation is to launch the Mount's New Women and Gender Studies major. I wish I was starting all over again. I would do I don't know if you would do things different, but that would probably be a major I would pick if I were starting all over. Feminism is central to that area of study. You are younger than me. And so I'm really curious how you define feminism and if it's a term and title that you relate to, quite frankly.
All right. So I was a math major and I would still be a math major, but
I told you because you're smart, right?
So before and before I got to the legislature, a lot of my identity politics revolved around being Latina, being a daughter of Mexican immigrants. Prop 187 was going on when I was in high school, Prop 209, right? So like that really helped like form a lot of my social justice mentalities along the way, and just feeling like those were really personal attacks on myself and my family. And it wasn't until I got to the legislature when I was being sworn in and I looked around the room and I was like, good Lord, there's no women in here. There's no brown women in here, which is ironic because I was in a field of that was like predominantly like white male. So, but it didn't feel as bad as it did in that moment. And so I think in that moment, so in that moment, I was like, I'm not okay with this. And so in that social justice in me, kind of like got triggered around like gender. And so for me, feminism, has been about making sure I have my fair share of the pie at a minimum 50%, but guys have been in charge here forever. So I want 100%. So while I'm always talking about getting parity in the legislature and that's 60, I'm like, well, I actually want 120 women in office, and let's give that a try. And so with that comes, not just in the legislature, but in society in general, right? And making sure that as we get that 50%, that's 50% of the power as well. So it's not enough just to say I have a spot someplace. So for me, feminism is about equity in that respect. And so in all levels of society, that we get to be leaders. And I think, it doesn't matter anymore if I'm a woman or not. And the woman card brings a certain set of skills that I'm proud of, and let's magnify that. And so that's what feminism means to me.
And, when I think back to the class when you arrived, good Lord, it was better then than it had been just a very few years prior in terms of the number of women and women of color in particular. So now you have the privilege of chairing the Women's Caucus at a moment in time where we've got the most women, help me with my facts, ever or in recent years? And what's your current number?
So the most women ever is 39, and that happened in 2019. Because of women like yourself who have moved on, we had a
but I was replaced by a woman in this
and I had the same situation with Miss Shirley Weber. Your replacement created a vacancy. So once Akila Weber for the 79th district gets sworn in, I'll have 38 women, and I have a few more specialists ahead of us, and so I'm hoping we get past 39 in the near future.
Fair enough. Where do you think the state is really succeeding in supporting women, and where could we be doing better to advance equity and justice for women?
I think right now with COVID and the setbacks we've had, I would say we're not succeeding at all. Women have been disproportionately affected in the job force, and it's been called a she session. It's been actually really bad for women of color here in California. Mm-hmm. Reports are talking about being set back 2 decades for women in general, which means if I'm a Black woman or a Latina or API, it's even more. And so I actually don't think we're doing well, that if 1 year in a recession could bring us back multiple decades, I don't think we're doing anything well for women right now, in all honesty. And so I think the moment gives us perspective of maybe the progress that we have had. I mean, yes, there are more women in office, you are seeing more of us as leaders, but I think this moment also tells us that that step forward has been tiny.
And so what will you and the Women's Caucus, what will be the priority areas that you will help lead us to change that dismal fact?
So, we're focused on early childhood education, and that's such an important part of our ability to be able to go to work and be part of society in that respect. I think it's how do we also do it as the Women's Caucus, but this is not like just the women's role. And so how do we make sure our male colleagues are also leading in that space? We're also talking about how do we use at the state level, because it's not the same at the local level, but at the state level, we have a lot of dollars, right? And so how do we use that dollars to help women get back into the workforce and make sure that we undo the setbacks quicker, right? Whether that's skilling up, whether that's entrepreneurship, whatever that might be. And so we are right now having those discussions with folks about, hey, experts, what should we be doing? Where should we be investing right now? And I think we're trying to figure that out quickly, as we have this rare opportunity that we haven't had in the 9 years I've been in office. When you were first here, you had to do a bunch of cuts, and we've been trying to get past that, and we haven't, and now we have a bigger hole. So I think we need to figure that out. But I think the real discussion is, how do we share responsibilities at home? I was talking to a new member, and she was telling me how she was still doing everything she was doing before at home. And I was like, this is not sustainable. Like, don't you have someone to help you at home? The husband, the kids? I'm like, or hire someone. But I think it's like, how do we also make sure that we're not expected to do everything at home and then we'll have a job and do everything there too? It doesn't make sense to me in any capacity. So I think the Women's Caucus needs to be leading that discussion in that way to change our cultural expectations and our norms in society. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to let you go work, but you still have to do all this other stuff at home, which kind of feels like the reality we live in right now.
Before I transition and ask you about your personal journey, I see the tampon tax flyer behind you. So as you talk about equity and change and creating a cultural paradigm shift, talk about the tampon tax, please.
It was funny. Part of the colleague that was here was telling me how her staff worker didn't have access to products the other day. And she's like, oh, thank God he has them here. I was like, they're supposed to be in the bathrooms. What do you mean?
Right, that's where they're supposed to be.
When I first got to the legislature 9 years ago, I wanted to get rid of the tax on menstrual products because I just felt like I was being taxed for being born a woman. So it was just like insult on top of insult for me. And so it always made me really angry. And initially folks were like, you can't do that. You're going to be laughed at. People already don't take you seriously for lots of different reasons. And so I listened to them for a little while. And then about 3 years in, I was like, you know what? I'm tired. I don't care what people think. I'm going to have this discussion, not just because I'm angry, but like my period should not be something I'm afraid of or ashamed of. It's not running through a field. It's not a blue liquid. It's a real part of my biology, and it has consequences, and I shouldn't have to deal with that and then pretend everything's fine, all the time as well. And the least you could do is get rid of this tax and make sure we have access to these products everywhere, just like toilet paper. And so introduce AB 1561 to get rid of the tax on menstrual products. It was the first bill in the nation that started a discussion that's now become international. It's really exciting. And the discussion isn't just about, the tax. I think it's about how our biology is turned into something negative against us. And again, that's that change we need in society of how we see these things. And so I have period products everywhere. People always ask me like how they could help. And I said, well, you could help by not hiding your period products in the bathroom and having them out, so people start to get used to it. And so it doesn't have to always be through policy, but it's through that I tell students, don't hide your period products when you have to go to the restroom. They're clean, they're in a package. Like we see blow 'em up stuff all the time on TV, and we're okay with that blood. And this blood is actually much cleaner a lot of times. Like worse, like it's so squeamish because it's coming out of a woman. So been working to increase access as well. So we have free products in schools. We're trying to pass a bill this year to have free products in all government-owned spaces at any level. And so we'll see how that goes. But as the county supervisor, I will tell you, you don't have to wait for us. You could just help push that at the county level, at our parks and our bathrooms. As someone tied at the college here, the college start to push that now for all of their students. They might already have them available. And so, you know, I've also stopped using tampon queen, for example. I gave myself that title, and I've been talking about as the period princess. I've had a lot of young women educate me about the fact that there are different products out there, and it's the one that is best for them. But when they're only hearing tampon queen, it makes it sound like that's a superior product. But there's cups, there's pads, there's sponges, and so underwear. And so I changed my title. I talk about people who menstruate and not just women, trying to be inclusive. We definitely have that. And so a lot of young women have had these discussions with me in this process. And so I've just really appreciated the education, you know, as woke as I might think I might be, of like just all the work I still have to do in this one space that I'm so involved in.
And I appreciate you for being comfortable and confident enough to know that, right, we're learning every day. I was struck by something you just said, and it feeds into my next question. When you said, quote, they already don't take you seriously. So when I first started my first year as legislator in residence at the Mount, which is just, you know, it's so much fun. I was in a classroom talking about leadership, and I was struck, Assemblywoman, by the women who had this vision of a straight line. They were right there at the Mount, and in their minds, they were gonna graduate, get a job, family, whatever, blah, blah, run for office. It was just a straight trajectory. And I thought, well, like, fill in the middle, what happens here? And like, well, you know what I just said, it's those points. And I was in a leadership training program at that point with women in government. And I went back to my leadership program and asked these women who were in elected office, from lieutenant governors to county commissioners to state legislators, other constitutional officers. I said, map for me your trajectory from, you know, whatever point to elected office. And nobody had a straight line. There were peaks and valleys, and some people did a roundabout that was all, you know, it was amazing. So talk to them about your own leadership journey. You know, the Mount is very proud of the leadership opportunities and what their alumni have done across this region. So just talk to us about, you know, how you got to where you are today. And that line about don't they, whoever they is, don't take you seriously. Weave that in if you would.
Okay, so I have a really healthy self-esteem and ego. And I think I've been a leader since I was little. And I think, you know, for folks watching, I want to say this, the straight line, this narrative, I feel is on purpose to hold us back and make us like, feel like, you know, we're not worthy, or we should be ashamed if we don't follow that line. And I think the courage and the like exciting part is when opportunities come, taking advantage of them and being fearless. And so I grew up in a household where not only was I given permission to take all of those opportunities, but I was expected to take those opportunities. But I think the second part of this puzzle is that I was given permission to fail, right? I never go into it expecting to fail, do everything you can to succeed. But my mom was like, it's okay if you fail, and pick yourself up and figure it out again. So, and it started with being a little kid and my mom telling me, like, you're in charge of your little sister. She said, you're younger than I am. And she, like most folks who, you know, come as immigrants, didn't have childcare, didn't make enough. And she's like, if we were sick, then I just wouldn't go to school because I had to take care of my sister and vice versa. And so it was like, you just figure it out, you know? And so, but I was a happy math student and I was a happy math teacher. And I moved home about 10 years ago because my parents were both really sick, and my siblings nominated me to come home, I like to say, because I'm nice to them. And they nominated me because I was just a teacher, and I've never forgiven them for that, because like teaching is amazing and it's like my first love. And so I was like, but I didn't think about it. It's like I grew up in a culture, in a home where I was like, you just step up and you do it. And like, you know, it's like, fine, I'm going to come home. And I was really angry when I realized that coming home was going to be much more than a couple of weeks, and I was going to have to move back to Bell Gardens. Success in Bell Gardens, a community that's working class. We're at the top of the list for all the bad things you can imagine. And success is like leaving and never coming back, right? And I think that's a narrative we need to change. There's a lot of talent in our community and a lot of amazing folks, and we have a responsibility to invest in that community if we've somehow made it on up, right? But that message isn't delivered to us. when it's not said. And I do try to deliver that now, that like, I'm investing in you because I expect you to come back and invest in this community. And I expect you to help change the narrative of this community. There's a lot of talent here. Like I remind myself, I come from stock that came here with nothing at 14 and 15, with a first grade education and a fifth grade education, and figured it out. Is financially successful now. They're homeowners. All 5 kids went to get at least a master's, right? And so like I come from amazing stock, and so I have to put that to use, and so does the rest of my community. But my sister's wiser and younger, and she was like, you have all this leadership skill, put it to work, and start going to council meetings. If you think it should be better here, like start investing in the community, like, go for it. And so I started going to meetings, asking questions. Neighboring city city members from Bell, Southgate, Linwood started asking me for help. And that led me down a rabbit hole in the city of Bell right next door to fight the corruption, where we started the community group named Basta to get rid of the corrupt elected officials and city manager. Never expecting anything from that. And then people were like, you should run for assembly. And I said, no. And then I went on vacation and I felt guilty because I have a really healthy self-esteem. And I was like, oh, I could beat the machine. And I was like, I should beat the machine because I want different. Like, this is like an opportunity. And so I came home the first week of January and I announced that I was running for assembly. And the election was in June, the primary. And so it was just like a mad rush to run, but I never.
So that was January to June in the same year.
Yes, and I also broke my leg, and I had a cast for my toes up my whole leg during the whole primary. It happened on MLK weekend, so 2 weeks after I announced. So people were like, "No one knows you. You have no money. You have a broken leg. Like, you're ridiculous, sister." And I was like, "No, but I can win. Like, I know I can win." I'm running against a family that had been entrenched for 3 decades in the region at all levels of government. And they were like, you're nuts. And I was like, I believe that the work we did in Bell, that I just have to remind people of the work I did. I don't need to have the same dollars they do. I just need to have enough to get my message out. And so we ran a grassroots campaign. I had some great mail, but I ran out of money to mail it. So I had volunteers hand deliver like 65,000 pieces of literature at some point. I had like my last 4 pieces of mail that I didn't have money for. So we had people hand deliver them to people's doors.
I didn't know about the broken leg and the hand delivery of the mail. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. So I mean, I had a great community.
And you won with what you won with what percentage of the vote? Do you remember?
Oh, probably like 40% of the vote in the primary, and the next closest person got like 18%. They outspent me like 8-1, but I think what we had was not just a story, but through the work in Bell, community members, were like, yeah, we'll step up and we'll do the work. You've been here working with us for a year, like, let's step up and do this work. And we just started to also believe that we could do it. I think a lot of the system makes us believe that we can't do it, that we can't win, so we don't even try. And so I think our efforts in Bell being successful led the community to believe that we could continue to fight, against the institution and win, and we did. And as soon as I won, I want to tell you this part, as soon as I won, that same family told me that I better support them for something else or they were going to like take me out, which like just made me laugh because I was like, but I just beat you. So this makes no sense in my logical head.
Wait, take me out. Where you gonna take me with my broken leg? Where are we going? I care for you and have such a profound, deep respect for you. And I appreciate you saying unapologetically, I have a healthy self-esteem, because I was on a panel that the Mount had with 2 of my colleagues in the board for the launch of their Women and Girls report a couple weeks ago. And the panel before me, the moderator talked about, imposter syndrome. And I'm like, I want us to stop talking about that and acknowledge that, everybody just has to hustle till you get it right. There's nobody more prepared, quite frankly, than anybody else. You just have to believe in yourself and get your hustle on. And your example was a perfect example of how that works. That the odds were, conventional wisdom would suggest, stacked against you, and it had no effect on your ability to believe in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the concept of the imposter syndrome, and I mentored a young woman, and I saw her as a district director recently, and I was like so proud of her and so excited to see her. But I could see her trying to like hide against the wall, and I was like, it's like, I want you to be approachable and I want you to be humble. This is the humble community you're in. But I want you to own the fact that you're the district director. That's pretty badass. And so don't be a wallflower. Like, it makes me feel like you could like step all over you, like own the fact that you've hustled hard to get here. This was not just handed to you. And it has not been easy in any capacity. And so I think the fact that I grew up in a household that wasn't traditional, my mom was in charge. My mom expected us to, take challenges on. My mom gave us permission to fail. I have a dad who is amazing. He was the nurturer in the house. And so the roles were reversed. Has been a blessing for me to allow me to not have that. And I think more of us need to just, own it, and you still have to be humble. I get it. And there's times where it's like, yes, this isn't for me, and I could just walk away from it. But and so I say I don't know, but I know that the household I grew in allowed me to, have that confidence.
Okay, so let's say that there's some folks on here who did not have the fortune of that kind of example and expectations from your mother and nurturing from your father. So how do you get it after the fact?
Well, I'll start off by telling you guys, if you're watching and you need that, like, I give you permission, and B, I have that expectation of you. And I think it starts also from us, telling folks, but that comes with the responsibility that we're going to have people's back in those moments. And so I think it's really easy to say that. And so while I might not have your individual back, I will have women's backs in general, to say that if you're in that spot, like, I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to stand up for you. If you want to hustle, I'm going to help you hustle to help you be successful and take the power I have and share it with you into that cause. So I think it comes, with take that risk, and then more of us saying, like, how can I help the people who are taking that hustle on? Because you know what, like, this job is hard. Advocating for my community is hard, and we have so many needs, and I do it with a lot of love and passion. But it's like, I'm going to do it. And other folks don't want to do it, and so it's like, fine. So if you're going to ask people, hey, go be the leader and represent me and be my voice, then you also have a responsibility to have their back when the going gets tough out there. And so, and there are more of us who are doing that. And I guess earlier in the feminist, what do I define that? I think that also comes with the responsibility to share your power with folks, if I go back to that initial question. And so I think we all, I think A, you take the risk and you own it, and then B, the rest of us have to be prepared to back you up.
So when you were told they don't take you seriously, what was your strategy to attempt to change whoever, people say they, I'm like, who's they? So was it your priority to change their minds, or did you ignore it and handle your business? So how did you respond to that claim?
So, I mean, that came from, like, I wasn't the chosen one, right? I was told you're messing up plans. And I was like, well, last I checked, that's not how public policy works. I mean, public office works. Right. So, like, I'm not going to accept that. I think the fact that I was younger, right? I'm not that young, but I was younger in terms of the legislature. I'm a woman. I'm brown. Whether or not they realized those biases, they were all there, right? Stacked up against me. I hadn't been here playing the game on their terms. And so I purposely decided that I was not going to play the game on their terms, because that game didn't work for my community. And so I was not going to come up here to do that. And, I think for myself, it's like, I'm going to have a little more work, but I'm going to put in the work to try to do it on my terms and create a different style of leadership up here, but also back home. And so it has had a lot of challenges. There's moments where it's like, am I crazy? Because I'm like running in circles, and am I really having success here? But I think ultimately it's being comfortable with myself and who I am. And it's like trying to be different. I'm not going to be successful. I'm going to fail. And I remember me in fifth grade, the first day of fifth grade, and all summer long, it was a new school. So all summer long, I had built up like what I was going to be in my new identity in this new school as a fifth grader. And my mom would buy us like $100 worth of clothes for the whole year. And that was like, we could go shopping with her and figure out what that was, but that was like our whole budget for the whole year. And then the rest of the clothes was either going to be from the swap meet or she would make it for us. So, as we needed. And so I convinced her to make me like a cute little like pencil skirt and blazer. And, I was like, I was going to go and make friends.
Gray pencil skirt, girl, please.
It was like a fuchsia pencil skirt that I made her make me. It was the 90s, 80s. So it was like fuchsia with some other bold colors on it. And so anyways, I told my dad, you know what, don't pick me up because I'm going to have friends. I'm going to walk home with them. And my dad was like, okay. And so at the end of the day, this pencil skirt and jacket were so uncomfortable. I didn't have any new friends, and my two friends were like, who are you? So they weren't talking to me. I walked home alone and was lost for like 2 hours because I didn't know how to get home and I didn't have any friends. So my dad eventually found me. But afterwards, I was like,
in your pencil skirt. He found you in your pencil skirt.
And it's hot. I'm just miserable. And so after that, I was like, I'm not gonna try to be someone else because I suck at it. So I'm just gonna be like happy with my two friends and be the good student that I like. I liked school. Like I was like in the math club and stuff like that. I did the math leads. I was like, let me go back to that. And so I always go back to that moment of like, just be yourself and you'll figure it out.
And I'm throwing shade talking about the pencil skirt because I've had hips since I was a toddler. So I've never been able to wear pencil skirts because I'm like, like this. So I'm jealous that you could wear a pencil skirt in fifth grade, and I've never been able to wear a pencil skirt.
I didn't have hips in fifth grade. I was a little late to develop. But I wouldn't wear a pencil skirt now, just like I don't wear white.
Yeah. Well, I've never been able to pull off a pencil skirt hips since toddlerhood. So let's talk about some of the recent violence that we have witnessed targeting women, targeting our Asian Pacific Islander sisters, targeting our Black trans sisters, just this violence that continues to be focused on women. Talk to me about what the Women's Caucus, what the conversations are happening. I miss you all, I'm not there. What are we all talking about? How do we, how can people be strong allies? Just talk about that. I mean, I don't even have a question. It's just so on the surface and painful for me, quite frankly. But just tell me where you are. What are you doing?
So, talk about the progress we still have to do. We have one API woman in the whole legislature. We legislate on experience, right? And it's personal when it's yourself, and it's a woman, so it should be personal for all of us, but it's a little different when it's, more than that. So I think because of that, it creates a little bit of a gap of where our attention is at, because there's so many different needs and so many like groups struggling now. So I think that there's a little bit of a void at time. We were trying through Women's History Month set up a panel discussion with our API leaders. We do have the one woman, we have constitutional officers, congressional women. So we're trying to do that with the API caucus together to discuss that leadership and what this means right now. And we ran out of time, but we're going to do it this month, and open it up to the community. So at least we're starting to have that discussion that way. There's been a lot of personal discussions with folks about that violence at times, or how we have all felt it at different times. I think there's a struggle at times where it's like, okay, like, let's not, how am I an ally to my API sisters in the moment that we're having right now? But how do we also talk about our own issues, and it's not a competition, and one doesn't have to outshine the other or outshadow the other one. And so I think at times there's that struggle. And so then people hesitate to have these bigger discussions with the public and are maybe having it in smaller circles. But COVID has made it so that we can't get together like that as much, right? And so those discussions are not happening even in those smaller circles as much right now. So I think these panels with the public are important, and we're talking to our API caucus of how can we be supportive, and it's also how do we elect more API women. We're looking at the special elections that we have right now in front of us, and are there some API women we could get behind so that their voices are here at the table as well. And how are we allies there with that work? And how do we hold our API caucus accountable for the fact that they, you know, they need to work with us also. Like there can't just be one woman, and they can't be okay with that. Like, especially in California, that we're like, you know, leading the resistance. It's embarrassing. And so we are
Exactly.
focusing on the campaign side of things. And I think it's taking stock of what our power is, right? And so we have an opportunity and power to elect some women. Like, let's make sure we're supporting some API women and trying to push that narrative. But I can't, you know, it takes time. In the same narrative, in the same way that there's only one Black woman in each house, that's also shameful, right? And so how do we take opportunities to elect more Black women into both of our houses? It's hard. We have been having the discussion of how hard it is to be the only one in the room and have to carry like the weight of everyone, and you can never tap out, and how exhausting that is, and how you do need to tap out, right? And so how am I as an ally going to help you when I can't replace your voice, right? And so it's like, and you need to tap out, and I'm not sure how to help you there. And it's like, the only way I could help you is bringing someone else into the room.
I love that. I love that. Acknowledging how hard it is when you're the only one in the room. I appreciate you. So I know chat is on fire, and so Emerald is going to manage us through. But before we get to the questions, Emerald, real quick, 2 rapid fire questions. This will be an easy one for you because I know you led kind of the book club in Sacramento when I was there. What are you reading currently, and what are you reading?
So right
currently?
now, my friends and I from college started the Chingonex book club, and we read books by authors who are bilingual. And so right now I'm reading Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. And so we just finished discussing Undocumented Americans, another great book out there. And so that's what my fun reading right now has been, our book club. But it's funny because we rotate the responsibility, and we all choose books on our experience. And so
that is fabulous. So if somebody could put in chat so we can all find Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. I got to pick that up. Second rapid fire question before we open it up to questions. What keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? I try to be good about my sleep, actually. I mean, I think you never feel like, I think for me, it's like, well, I have that confidence and that healthy self-esteem and ego. It's like, am I doing enough? Am I harnessing my power enough? But also, am I doing it in a way that I'm not a martyr and I'm still enjoying my life and my career?
Right.
And as I've gotten older, that, you know, actually that was important when I was younger, and I lost it for a while when I first got to this job, and I had to find that again. And so actually that's part of what keeps me up, of like, am I, like, as I'm doing the women's caucus work as the chair, and like I'm into that, it's like, but am I losing myself in this space? Am I elevating my agenda beyond this women's caucus? Because if I'm not, then it's like, I'm just here to be a servant to these ladies, and like, that's not the role that I want. And so that's actually something that like I'm constantly struggling with, of like, how do I make sure I have enough time to be successful there without losing myself in that process and my passions.
And I'm glad that you're working hard to find that balance. That makes me happy for you and with you. That was powerful, Emerald. Walk us through some of the questions that people have put forward. All right, Women of the Mount.
These are some really great questions, so please keep them coming, but we've got plenty to keep us occupied. So the first question is, how would single payer change the way women in the Assembly board lead in healthcare?
I would single pair. I could read it myself.
Change the way women in the Assembly lead in healthcare.
I'm not sure I fully understand that question.
Me either.
So perhaps
all of us having healthcare that works, because sometimes we have healthcare and it doesn't work, would relieve a lot of stress from our lives.
Right.
I mean, I'm not. My assumption is it might be a leading question, but I don't get the point. I can't help you.
Well, perhaps, that questioner can put more information in the Q&A.
Clarify, please.
Another question: how important is intersectionality and feminism, and how do you implement that in your work and life?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important, right? I started talking about my identity politics was about being a Latina, daughter of Mexican immigrants, and that hasn't gone away. That still very much colors like what I do. And, you add gender in there. And so I think it's very important. I think especially because as we add more layers, the work we have to do to get our fair share of the pie is more and more. And so I think this idea that we all, like, once you get to your fair share of the pie, does that mean that everyone else behind you got there? And it's like, no, we're not all going to get there at the same time, or the push to get us there has to be that much stronger based on the different intersectionalities that we have to deal with out there. And so I do think as we're talking about sharing our power, that intersection needs to be present, and my reality is not going to match, I'm not gonna, even in the Latino community, my reality is not gonna match the reality of an immigrant woman, right? And like all the privilege that I have for being born here in there, right? Or if we're gonna add sexuality, or we're gonna add if I'm able or not, all those things. And so I think that it's very important when we talk about feminism, we want to make sure that it's equitable and we're bringing along all women, not just some women.
Absolutely.
I've had the opportunity to talk to Kimberly Crenshaw, the one who kind of coined that concept so many years ago now. And, the fact that we can name it and ID it, identify it as a challenge, that it is multi-layered, I think is an important first step in beginning to pull back, structural racism and sexism and ageism and classism, which is what defines, the intersectionality itself. So I think it's important that it was named, we can ID it, and begin to dismantle it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. One questioner wants to know if you'll both tell us a little bit more about struggles of not only being a woman, but also being a woman of color and getting into politics.
So I was funny because I was just talking to someone about this, like even the smallest things are struggle as a woman of color in politics. Like I have really curly hair and like, I don't know how often I was saying go to like not taken seriously. They're like, you should straighten your hair so people take you more seriously. I was like, what are you talking about? And so even the most basic part of our biology is like, held against us as a woman of color a lot of times here. And it's just like, really, like I have to worry about hair? I have like a million other things to worry about.
Yeah.
And, that led to me carrying the bill, the Crown Act, acknowledging that I wear my hair in locks. I've been locked since I've been in public office. But the fact that, there were Black women and men across this country, girls being suspended from school for wearing their hair in locks, twists, or braids. But the fact that, certain groups of people are held to a very Eurocentric standard of what's acceptable in school, the workplace, was just inappropriate and unfair. And the fact that it didn't matter that was a broken leg, no money, 5 minutes lead time, she beat an institution. Now we're going to pick her apart and suggest that people will take you more seriously if you straighten your hair. Well, says who?
Mm-hmm.
Says who? And those are the questions and the institutions and the theories that we have to work hard to call out and dismantle.
And we're not allowed, I think as women of color, we're not allowed to have imperfections or mess up. It's like, oh yeah, so you don't belong here. We're not allowed to have second chances and be human beings. And so you have this chip on your shoulder, like you have to be that much better and that much like more perfect. And I think women in general have some of that, but it's like this whole other layer with when you add race in there and other layers, like when that intersection that we just talked about. And so I think that's the other challenge here when I see like the standard that I'm held to, and I'll see my colleague right next to me and I'm like, why aren't you holding her or that male to that same standard? Because then maybe I'm going to be okay with it. But otherwise it's BS that I have such a different standard and like, it's so quick to be dismissive of me because I'm a woman of color.
Right.
I think, and when we call it out, then we're being sensitive. Oh, Hala, you're playing the race card. Am I? Or is the world playing the race card against me?
I'm being dramatic and fussy.
Right. And I'm an angry Black woman. Most days I am. Christina, do you remember the Women's Caucus? We had the woman come in to talk to us about running, and she talked about
Mhm.
hoop earrings. I thought about it. I don't have mine on today. I saw your hoop earrings. And it was this notion, it was a very antiquated notion about what you have to look like as a candidate. And everything she put on the board about what you're not supposed to do, I looked at myself, I'm like, that's who I am today. You know, I can have some blue or green or red or clear nails. I have big audacious jewelry. I wear hoop earrings, red lipstick. We do all those things. And it struck me, and some of us stood up and said, time out, unacceptable, because we don't want the next generation of women leaders to subscribe to that BS, that those things had no bearing on the assemblywoman and my ability to be elected. You remember that?
I remember that, yeah. And so what I took from that was like, not that I'm, it's like I'm still gonna be myself, but it's like these are the challenges that are against me to begin with. And it's like even what I have to wear and dress, and I'm like, I'm more comfortable wearing my flats and my yoga pants. And it's like, I'm gonna be a better legislator because I could think better that way and I could hustle better that way. But like the fact that I instead I have to put on what I call a monkey suit half the time. And so, I pick my fights. I still wear my hoop earrings. I'm not gonna straighten my hair, but I'm gonna put on the monkey suit a little, more often than not.
So you all talked about the tampon tax. A questioner asks, will getting rid of the tampon tax also get rid of the pink tax?
No, and so and let me be clear, the tampon tax isn't gone. It's been temporarily suspended through the budget. And so I do think we need to be fighting to get rid of it, and that should be a permanent suspension. And I've been told, well, find us the money, which is just insulting to me that I have to be born with the uterus and have the rules stacked against me. Now I have to like go find you the money, so, for you to balance your budget. So, but it will not get rid of the pink tax. We have a second bill that we're working on with Rebecca Bauer-Kahan, I'm a joint author, to start to get rid of the pink tax. And even then, I don't know if that will fully get rid of the pink tax, but the fact that we get charged differently for things that are, for women. So the same toolkit, but it's pink. So I'm gonna have to pay 10 more bucks, which is just ridiculous.
That's what I was going to say. Define the pink tax for those who may not know. When you go to the dry cleaners and I have a blouse versus a man's shirt, I pay more to have my blouse dry cleaned than a man's shirt. So those are, like you said, the pink toolkit versus whatever color toolkits the brothers get is charged different.
Right. A couple questioners have questions about the Me Too movement. So can you talk to us about the Me Too movement and how we can get more involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, it's called the watershed moment. I think it was watershed in the sense that a lot of us as women were having those discussions individually and like having, just like, oh, like don't hang out with this person or so forth, and that burden. But now we are talking about that burden publicly. I think what's hard with the Me Too movement is that a lot of it has been driven by victims sharing their stories. And it's like every time you share a story, it feels like you have to be re-victimized at times. And so not everyone's ready for that out there as well. And so, but I do think, we at times we're in rooms and things are being said, microaggressions are being said. And how do we have the courage to say that's not okay, right? And how do we make sure it's not just the women who are saying that, but that our male colleagues are joining us in that discussion? So I think while there's policy that needs to be done and maybe some stories need to be shared, I think it's more like important to like even in your own home, right? It's like, what are you doing at home? When you hear those things, to challenge that narrative at home and making sure that it's not just on the shoulder of the woman. And the same thing with race, like Latinos can get pretty racist to our Black brothers and sisters. And so I think in that movement, it's like, I could get up there and make all these speeches, but sometimes the more impactful thing is like, am I telling my mom, hey, that's not okay? And am I trying to have a discussion with them about that? Am I having that discussion with my aunt instead of just saying, oh yeah, there she is again, and like, I'm just gonna ignore it. And so I think to get involved, it's to have those discussions and call it out, because those microaggressions lead to the bigger stuff. I feel like you don't start off, with the sexual harasser to begin with, but like no one stopped you earlier, so you build your way up to that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think whether or not you have had your own Me Too experience, everybody's had a bystander experience. And it's the kind of culture shift that's going to require everybody to take action, whether you're a policymaker or not. And you can't wait until you're in the moment to then try to figure out what to do. We changed our training at the legislature before I left to include bystander training. People need to kind of think through, if I were ever confronted with A, B, C, or D, what would I do? To see that visual of the older Asian American woman in New York to be kicked and punched in the street, and to have the man watch it and then close the door and do nothing to help her is inexcusable. And so to have those conversations with family members, I did that, with my son growing up all the time. If you were to see this or do that, what would you do? Because unless you kind of think through and have a plan, you can't just rely that instinctively you'll know the right thing to say or do. So people should think it through when you see those kinds of stories on TV. What would I have done in that scenario? So the bystander movement has got to be what we all embrace, and we're clear about what actions that everybody is willing to take.
And I will say with the bystander, there's signs that when you, it's like maybe you're not prepared, and you might walk away like afterwards, like, oh, maybe I should have done something. It's like, take a little stock of that and create a plan and be prepared for the next time, because we're not always going to do it right. But how do you take a little stock of that
I
as
agree.
well for the next time?
I agree.
Yeah. For the Assemblywoman, what is the biggest common value among members of the Women's Caucus?
Wait, can you repeat that?
What's
What
the
is-
biggest common value among the members of the Women's Caucus?
I think there's such diversity, so I don't know if it's like the common value. I think what's exciting is that together we have a great collection of values in there. And so I think we go back to like, I'm going to do it my way, right? So, I think in general, we all respect our place here, and that we deserve to be at the table, and more women should be at the table, not just in the legislature, but in societies. I think that we all have that value. I think we're all feminists, whether we call it that or not. I'm not sure that all my colleagues would use that term, but I think we all realize that we bring value, that we deserve to be here, and more women should be, leading.
Absolutely.
I would say the common characteristic of all the women in the Women's Caucus is badassery. Recognizing what it took for all of them to get there. You heard the story of one assembly member, and that's amplified times 38. Everybody has a unique path they took, but all of them had a path that was complicated, quite frankly, by gender.
Mhm.
That's the reality. So the common characteristic, from my perspective, is badassery.
I like it. For the both of you, what advice would you have for women who are interested in starting or leading a women's group?
So, and I had the pleasure of serving with Holly here, and always like coming with my grievances with
you let me, I don't have younger siblings, so you let me practice my big sister role. I appreciate you.
But she would remind me that, you have to be, if you're starting a group and you're trying to, be leaders, that you have to meet women where they're at and not impose your expectations on them. And so I think it's finding that common ground, and what are some of the core visions and mission and goals that you have together, and how do you empower each other? How do you help them also attain their goals, right? But I think it's finding the way that you create a collective vision, and you're not putting your expectations on them, and meeting them where they're at, and being okay when they disappoint you. It doesn't mean you just walk away, because there's plenty of times that they don't disappoint you, and they do what you need them to do to move the cause forward. And so I think you need to be prepared for that also if you're trying to start a group, and find a few sisters that have the same goal as you.
What she said.
Love it, for sure. Okay, so we're running out of time, and I think the self-esteem aspect came up several times in the discussion. So a great question that one of our attendees has asked, do you have any advice on how to develop a healthy self-esteem?
Well, look, I will say like, stop trying to be something that you're not, right? And so just kind of like, what makes you happy, what makes it go? And I think, foster that in you. And that's really hard when you have all these images and people telling you otherwise. I mean, I've had my own team try to tell me like, you should be this instead. And I'm like, do you want me to fire you? Because like, that's, I want you to tell me when I'm wrong. I want you to tell me when I'm about to jump off the deep end. I don't want just yes people, but don't tell me to be someone different. Like, and so I think also surrounding yourself with a tribe where you could be vulnerable and talk about your weaknesses, talk about, where you need advice with, or, talk stuff through to figure out how to get to the next phase without them having to change you. And as my friends and I have gotten older, we've also gotten much more comfortable that like their pathway's different than mine. And that doesn't mean we can't be friends and we can't be supportive of each other. So my friends are having kids and while I don't want to have kids, like that's okay, right? And we can still be in each other's lives and support each other with our goals in different ways out there. And so I think that tribe is key for you to have that healthy self-esteem, because we have things coming at us all the time and social media has just magnified that for us, and what it is to be the good woman or the good looking woman or the perfect woman, and things that are just not realistic in any capacity. So like for myself, that has meant that I'm not on social media anymore. And I have a social media presence. You could go follow me for work, right? And we do a lot of stuff there and we share what we're doing. But I don't go on there anymore because I know that just gets me to a place where I can't be myself and I can't be the person that I need to be. So I've also have to learn to take stock of my limitations and be okay with that in this. But my tribe has been key to me, and then turning off some of that noise, but not turning off everything, because you still need to hear when you're messing up.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
I would say don't focus on it, because it gets easier with age, with learned experiences, with successes, mistakes. You just over time get over it. And even though I'm saying that right now, you can't hear it because you're in the middle of that stage of your life. And so I'm just telling you, on the north side of 56, it just gets easier as you get older. So if you could just not let it overwhelm you, just keep living, put one foot in front of the other every day. Over time, it will change. You will come to your own aha moments, like the Assemblywoman. They have social media that makes me feel better. Everybody will be on a different path. Just don't get stuck where you are, and just know with every passing year, it'll get easier and easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great note to end on. So we're out of time. I want to thank our participants, Holly Mitchell, Christina Garcia, for joining us. Your wisdom is amazing, and it's what a wonderful way to kick off our new Women and Gender Studies program with this conversation. So I thank you so much for your leadership and your modeling of what leadership looks like for our community. So for anyone interested in center programming, come on to our website. That's msmu.edu/CAW. Get in touch with me if you want to talk about today's show or more content that you want in the future. But this concludes today's program, and I thank Assemblymember Garcia and Supervisor Mitchell for what a wonderful conversation we just had. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Emerald, and to the Women of the Mount. Appreciate
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.